Did our prime minister just reveal the game? So Mark Carney made an announcement that is pretty interesting to just announce this on national television. It's not shocking for those who have been paying attention, for those who understand the direction of where Mark Carney is taking this government and taking this country into, that we're kind of very much delving into authoritarianism rise that, for over a decade now, we know that Justin Trudeau was, penetrated by the WEF. We know that his cabinet, people like Chrystia Freeland to Sean Fraser to Stephen Guilbeault to all these individuals are all part of the WEF initiative. And people like Klaus Schwab immediately announced that, we penetrated Trudeau's cabinet in Canada. So we know we've already been taken over. And I've stated this before, that everyone that assumes that, Trump is going to take over in the 51st state and, they're so angry and uproaring and, oh my God, we don't want our sovereignty to be taken by America. I hate to break the news to you, and I've repeated this over and over again. I hate to break the news to people, but our sovereignty is already gone. Our sovereignty is already gone. And it's been gone for years. And here's Mark Carney. This is from pointed out by Jasmine Lane, who does great work. I highly recommend checking out her podcast. She says, just now, Mark Carney says authoritarianism has risen. Can he elaborate as to where, what he's referring to? He uses a lot of buzzwords with very little evidence of fear-mongering intended by them. So he makes this, big announcement that authoritarianism is on the rise. And by assumption, he probably thinks that people are going to believe that this is directed at Donald Trump in America. But I'm going to explain to you that the reason he's so vague about this is because he's talking about himself in this perspective. So listen to what he says.
To the world's largest and most dynamic economy directly to the south. And we also had the expectation that the world would converge over time towards free markets, open societies, and democratic values. But now the world is undergoing a series of fundamental shifts. New technologies have brought distant threats to our door. Power has become multipolar. Authoritarianism is resurgent, and consensus within many democracies, not all, but many democracies, has fractured. These developments are also reducing the effectiveness of global institutions on which middle powers like Canada have long relied. To the world's largest.
So he makes this statement about new technology, the rise of authoritarianism, that institutions feel threatened because of this multipolar world that we're in. And people are starting to wake up to this, and this is threatening to the institutions, the global institutions that Canada's taken part of. I would argue that Canada hasn't taken part of global institutions, that global institutions have infiltrated Canada. They have taken over this country. Like I said, I'm not worried about Donald Trump in the 51st state. I'm not doing the chicken dance because I know how absurd that was. That was manufactured to get Mark Carney elected as prime minister in the first place, but also in the fact that we have already been taken over. Our sovereignty is long gone in this country, unfortunately. That the reason we have Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland, Stephen Guilbeault and Sean Fraser and all these other ministers, the reason we have this circus of parliamentary politics, the reason we're in this is because our country has been taken over by global institutions like the WEF, like the WHO, like the billionaire class of George Soros and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and all these creatures that really control society, that really control the world. So is he talking about that? Or is he trying to make a statement to convince Canadians, because we're already in this kind of, mind warp, this kind of mind control, to automatically assume that anything bad is directed at America? Which I'm not defending America in this. I know we're, as we're witnessing Donald Trump transforming America, into a new age of fascism. America also for years has been, hijacked by institutions, by these global elites, by the billionaire class. So again, where is he directing this to? And why is he making this statement on national television? Very, very interesting. So here, Table Salt, he found this video. So this is Mark Carney at this event, the Council on Foreign Relations. I believe this is in Europe. I'm not totally sure exactly the location, but I think this is over in Europe. And he had a conversation with this guy here, and Table Salt says Canada's prime minister in New York. Okay, so New York City. I thought it was in Europe. No, it's in New York City. So this was during the UN summit, where Canada, France, UK, Portugal, and other places have recently just announced the recognition of Palestinian statehood, which I've already stated my case that I think it's kind of ridiculous, not because I don't recognize Palestinians. Obviously, I reach out to the people of Gaza, but I think it's ridiculous that at this point, when Israel's already confirmed their final solution, when everything's already destroyed, when there are already, mass amounts of famine in that area, to recognize a statehood at this point is ridiculous. It's very redundant. And I don't think Mark Carney understands that. He's trying to make it as a scapegoat to say, well, we did it. We recognize Palestine, so you guys protesting and making uproars about this, shut the hell up. Mark Carney is dedicated to the state of Israel. He's, sending more ammunition as he's recognizing Palestine as a state. So it doesn't even make sense why he's announcing this. But here in New York City, he says Canada doesn't want to wake up, with all due respect, and find out what on Truth Social or X, what the latest change in U.S. policy is, but wants to get on with what we can control, what he can control. So he's saying that Canadians don't want to, do their own research. They don't want to look at Truth Social or X and view the world and see different perspectives. They want to trust us. They want us to take control of the narrative. That's what ultimately he's saying here. But let's see the video evidence to back that.
One thing I'd impress upon the audience is that Canadians understand the need to, as we put it, to be masters in our own house. The country does not want to wake up and look on, with all due respect, on Truth Social or X to see what the latest change is in U.S. policy, but wants to get on with what we can control. And that's a big part of the government's strategies.
So when he says that we need to take over our own house, he doesn't mean that individual Canadians had the rights and civil liberties to act as individuals and come to their own conclusions, do their own research, express their freedom of speech. No, he's saying that we need to take control. He's saying that too many Canadians are looking on X and Truth Social and are awakened to this, and that's not what Canada's about. Canada's not looking at all the parts of the world and conducting their own conclusions and looking at the good and the bad and looking at all this information critically. They're not for that. They're for, compliance with our agenda. They're looking for a savior like Mark Carney to swoop in at this perfect time to save us from a crisis that was conducted in part with the liberal establishment causing these problems. And now Mark Carney, who's the prime minister that we have not seen in over a decade in this country, takes the opportunity to say, no, Canadians don't want this. Canadians don't want to have individual freedoms and the ability to have their own conclusions and do their own research. No, they want to be consolidated. We need to consolidate the general public and make them compliant. And part of his strategy, that's why, back when he was campaigning, one of his notions was to ban X, was to go after Truth Social, was to go after these so-called American media outlets that were pushing misinformation and misogyny and xenophobia and all this other stuff. Well, there goes almost the entirety of the internet. Because let's face it, all these social media networks come from the United States. So if you're going to ban it from the United States because they're pushing all this misogyny and misinformation, where is Canada going to look at for social media? I mean, they're trying to develop their own social media app, but is that going to come out? Is that going to be official? Is that going to be as big as Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok and all these other platforms that so many people have already came together on? Anyway, let's see the rest of this.
Getting rid of barriers east-west, as you put it, barriers across the provinces, that alone, if it's fully done, we've done the federal part, but if all our provinces reduce their barriers, the estimates are that is a bigger return to the Canadian economy than the worst-case trade outcome with the U.S. Now, one has a more immediate impact.
I just want to remind people, we have the lowest GDP in the developed nations of the world. The lowest GDP growth. That we have the highest unemployment with the youth demographic in any other developed nation. Our country's going backwards, not forwards. It's going backwards. And I have stated this is my theory on this, that Mark Carney, because he came from a private equity background, he came from Brookfield, an asset management firm, that this is all intentional. That he's purposely causing the economy to slide backwards and liquidate as much of Canadian assets as possible so that multinational firms like Brookfield can take a larger portion of the country of Canada and leave Canadians out to dry, throwing them under the bus. I mean, they've already made announcements. They've had ministers and whatnot coming forward to say that, hey, if Ontario loses its auto manufacturer because of these tariffs, because we're not actually engaging in responding to the trade war with Donald Trump, we're not actually engaging with them, it's not so bad because all the auto manufacturers can start making weapons. They can make weapons for Ukraine. They can make weapons for Israel that will just transform the economy from reliable, safe, and sustainable to this death economy that we're manufacturing all these weapons that we're producing for the military-industrial complex. That's not Canada to me. To me, that sounds like more of the United States. Ironic, right? We're supposed to be anti-American, but yet we're going in the direction of everything that kind of America represents. You know, the facilitating of the military-industrial complex. The fact that Mark Carney is taking more authoritarian control as he's saying that Donald Trump is taking authoritarian control. And again, I'm not defending America. I'm not saying one is better than the other. But I'm saying that Mark Carney needs to look himself in the mirror every time he makes these statements. Because we've seen Bill C-9 coming out. That's a further step into censorship, authoritarianism, that they want to lock you in prison for hate speech or spreading hate propaganda, which doesn't make any sense. We know that a lot of these industries are under harsh impact because of the economy, because of the trade war, because of the fact that Mark Carney, as he's trying to tell people that we need to invest more into Canada, he's doing the exact opposite. He's not investing in Canada. He's siphoning Canada. He wants to take all these resources. He wants to take all these elements and drive it towards Brookfield and drive it towards these multinational interests that have no parts in Canada and its identity and its culture. That's why you're seeing the rise of temporary foreign workers. That's why you're seeing the rise of Canadians that are feeling the burden of this hostile takeover of someone like Mark Carney, who is supposed to come in and be the savior of a crisis that was manufactured by the same party. Anyway, it's so crazy.
And the other builds over time, but the orders of magnitude are clear. And that's before we do what we need to do, which is to double the rate of housing. We announced a new approach on housing and
double the rate of housing. We got double the rate of housing. Well, thank God Brookfield's tied to that. Thank God Brookfield wants to buy and acquire a modular home construction company and take portion of that. That's why all of a sudden housing has become such an issue. It's been an issue for over a decade. It's something that Justin Trudeau should have done. It's something that the Liberal Party, we've been screaming at the Liberal Party to get on with this. And now Mark Carney, all of a sudden, we got to, double and triple the housing. Because Brookfield is going to get a huge investment return off of the despairing act of manufacturing these modular homes that aren't equipped, that have, assumptions to believe that there's, crony and corruption between it. I mean, we just saw the housing announcement. That was a complete a flaw and was a false act. They brought in movie sets so that Mark Carney can announce that, look at us, we're building this great, luscious home that could be yours. It's fake. It was a fake statement. And here's Mark Carney, trying to make the outside, Canada's on top with housing. So, what exactly is he meaning when authoritarianism is taking over? And does he include Canada in that perspective? Well, here's just to remind people, we showed this before, but this is the chair of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. This is a government-run organization to crack down on what they consider hate speech. This is the chair, Bernie Farber, who has repeatedly misrepresented the truth. So he's a serial liar. And now he's in charge of the Anti-Hate Network in Canada to crack down on institutions that don't ally with the government narrative. And as Wiretap Media points out, this has resulted in a rise of political violence in Canada. And this is what he said on national television. This is recorded on CPAC. Him announcing that all these institutions, from schools to lawyer offices, are infiltrated by Nazis. Again, this is the same government, the same party that demonized ordinary Canadians that took part in the Freedom Convoy as a bunch of white supremacist Nazis. Now he's saying it's all over the place, and we need to crack down further on anti-hate. Watch this.
When there was a turn towards Islamophobia, Canadians and a lot of young Canadians turned against that. And I think that's something to recognize. However, let's be clear. The Nazis of the 1980s and 1990s are not the Nazis of 2019. They are not skinheads on the streets getting into fights. They're in universities. They're in colleges. They're in businesses. They're in law firms. They're in government. They're all over the place. And if you take a look at them today, they're wearing suits and ties, nice trimmed beards, and they're finding ways into young people's consciousness. And we have to find a way to battle that. And the only way to battle that, well, you have your parents on the one hand, but where are kids spending most of their time? In school. In school. And that's where the education really has to begin. As young as in kindergarten, right through high school and right through university. And if we don't get that...
So this is him announcing that the younger generation, younger Canadians, because they go to school, because apparently there's so many Nazis out there in suits and ties that are educating them and giving lawyer advice and on social media, that we, the government of Canada, we, this organization, fueled and funded by the government, need to take control of your kids. He's saying that, yeah, parents can maybe do something about it, but I think we, him, The anti-hate network, the government of Canada, we need to take control of your kids because your kids are being influenced by other perspectives, and they might develop a conscience. They might develop and use cognitive dissonance and have critical thought. And we can't allow that to happen. To me, that sounds a bit authoritarian. Is that what Mark Carney's stating? Is this the authoritarianism that he's stating? Because I consider that. Then we need to crack down on universities and schools and lawyer offices and businesses that are promoting this Nazi agenda. It's like the 30s, but they're all wearing suits and ties. It's crazy. Again, coming from the same government that demonized Canadians during the Freedom Convoy as a bunch of white supremacists, xenophobic, Islamophobic, white supremacist, a bunch of fascists, that we saw all Canadians of all walks of life coming together to stop authoritarian rule. This is the tactic. They're trying to say we're stopping fascism by implementing fascism. That's what's so miraculous about this. They are guilty of their own, they're guilty of what they're spewing. That Mark Carney and Bernie Farber and all these ministers in the Liberal government, in Parliament, are guilty of what they're stating. They're trying to say that, all these authoritarian regimes around the world are causing so much chaos. Like, look at America. Look at, all these other places. But we're not doing any better. We're not doing better. We're trying to confiscate guns, for God's sakes. They're trying to say it's voluntarily, but we know that ministers are pushing for mandatory. They want to be mandatory. They want you to not have self-defense. They want crime to run amok because chaos favors the establishment. For this reason, when there's chaos on the streets, when there's people going hectic, when paranoia runs amok and fear-mongering is spewed into the minds of people, they will bend to their knees for authoritarian solutions. Just like this. Just like this. Oh, there's so much hatred out there. That's why I gotta trust this guy and the government to crack down on institutions. That's why I need social media to not exist in Canada. That's why we can't have the internet available and open to the general public of Canada because, God forbid, people might use their own thoughts. We can't allow that. So that's why they're doing this. That's why everything from the economy, everything from crime, all this is trying to lead into this direction. And it's amazing Mark Carney can state that so openly, so vague, and make it sound like it's someone else, but really he's describing his style of governance. So here's just to remind people, this is from 2024. Remember this? Remember the National Post revealed that there was a secret RCMP letter that went around inside the RCMP, inside the government of Canada, that revealed that if Canadians knew how bad our country was going, if they realized the direction of where Justin Trudeau, Mark Carney, the Liberal establishment, the parliamentary system is doing to this country, Canadians would revolt. Secret RCMP reports warns Canadians may revolt once they realize how broke they are. And that's why Mark Carney came up with the brilliant idea to trick people, to take over and brainwash people with the elbows up psyop. That's what it was. It was a psyop. To get you on the streets dancing like a chicken, saying that you're supporting Canada when we know that our Canadian politicians are not even supportive of Canada. They're taking away your right to hunting rifles. They're taking away your speech. They're disavowing you from having a bank account and having access to your own finances. Like, that's an authoritarian rule. That's not Canada. That's not the Canada I grew up with. That's not the Canada that I support. And that shouldn't happen to any Canadian. But here we are, Mark Carney instituting fascism and authoritarianism while trying to denounce it for other countries. And the reason for that is because exactly this. If Canadians knew how bad the country is getting, they would go into revolt. And I've stated this before, that we are going to have to maybe go in this direction. I'm not saying, political violence. I obviously condemn violent acts, but we're at the point now where we're almost going to need another freedom convoy, not like a small setup as we did with the, mandates. But I'm saying coast to coast, revolutionizing this country for the better. Because, look what's happening. We just covered the story about BC and the ostrich farm. How heartbreaking that is. These are healthy birds. And you have the RCMP, you have the food agencies, and other law enforcement cracking down on a farm to go and slaughter healthy ostriches. They're seeing bank accounts being frozen up. We see, jobs being displaced. So, no doubt that this is done purposely for that reason, to bring authoritarianism. And the reason I know this is because Mark Carney wrote about it. A lot of people did not know about this. I'm surprised a lot of people did not know that Mark Carney wrote a book. And I'm sure they probably did not know this going into the election and voting for him. That, yeah, he kind of wrote his manifesto right here. So this book, Values, Building a Better World for All. This is directly from the book. It says, Western society is morally rotten and has been corrupted by capitalism. This requires rigid controls of personal freedoms, industry, and corporate funding. This is not a promise to make the lives of ordinary people better but temporarily worse. This will be a world of severely constrained choice. Less flying, less meat, more inconvenience, and temporarily more poverty. That's what he's doing. That is what he is doing. This is a manifesto of how Mark Carney is governing Canada. This is directly from his book. That he is deliberately stating how he governs nations. And since he almost broke England when he was the governor of the Bank of England, how he almost destroyed that country, now he's prime minister of ours, and now he's rolling out exactly what he describes in detail of his own book. Assets will be stranded, gasoline cars will be unsellable, and insignificant properties will be unrented. So, Mark Carney, that's on stage, the Mark Carney you just saw here, telling you about authoritarianism has risen. He should be saying that to a mirror, because this is an authoritarian thug. Mark Carney, the central banker, directed from the WEF, directly from Brookfield, a private equity firm, is intentionally destroying the country for that reason. To bring authoritarianism, to bring capitalist control, to bring central power, to destroy Canadian sovereignty. This is why all this is happening. And Mark Carney making this announcement so vague and not directing to any country is kind of revealing. It's kind of revealing because it reveals his true self. That this is how he wanted to govern. That he was programmed. He was trained to be this kind of leader. To be an authoritarian thug. And destroy the reputation, the identity, the culture, everything that Canada represents. And it's because a lot of these people in the WEF and the globalist sphere, they don't recognize countries. What have I stated before? It's like the movie Network. I know it sounds like a broken record pointing this out. But that movie in 1976 had a scene where they discussed that These people don't look at countries as countries. We don't have countries. We have billionaires and the international transfer of dollars. That's what we have. And Mark Carney is that, a puppet of that world. So all the people out there that are, chanting about how Donald Trump's going to take over Canada if we don't come together and support Mark Carney, buy Canadian, all this stuff, you're being duped. You got duped. They purposely used and abused you to get Mark Carney elected to transform this country into the worst case possible. And they don't want people to know about it because of exactly this. Once people realize how broke and damaged this country is and how Mark Carney is not there to save you, even Pierre Poilievre. I even throw Pierre Poilievre in this. Because I know people like to say, well, he says the right thing. Yeah, exactly. He says the right thing. But once you get into a position of power, once you become comfortable, we've seen how politics is a game, and they destroy people. They destroy mentality. I mean, you look at America, you look at AOC, you look at Bernie. Are they out there to support you? No. They're out there to support themselves and their donors. And Pierre Poilievre, the NDP, the Green Party, Bloc Québécois, they probably would have done the same, because all of Parliament works for the donor class, not for you, for the people that pay them to cause this kind of ruckus. And people were more aware of this. This is why they want to keep it in the dark. If more people were aware of this, Canadians would be furiated. Just like I'm furiated. That's how I got radicalized. Because I saw what was being presented to me and then realized that that was completely false. What CBC, what CTV, what Global, what City News, what all these outlets were telling me were actually false. Because I'm an observant person. I looked around at certain areas. I actually did some fact checking and realized what they were telling me was complete crap. And it's because of this. They don't want people to know. And I wish more and more people understood, and that's why I have a show. That's why there's shows existing that point this out. And that's why it's harmful to the Canadian identity. That's why they proposed Bill C-11 to crack down on podcasters, because they don't want this information to be revealed to the peasants, because the peasants, when they realize this and think critically, they're going to revolt against the masters. It's happened throughout human history, and why censorship is one of the ultimate struggles throughout human history. So don't let them silence you. Don't let them decide what information you're allowed to see, because you are an adult, you have a functioning brain, and you're allowed to use it. So think critically, be vigilant, come together in solidarity on common issues, and don't let them divide, decide, and destroy you.